Very good, sir.
Hi, everybody. Welcome and welcome back if you were able to join us on Monday's live stream. I am Holly Pettis, the Deputy Expedition Leader.
And I'm Marley Parker, the Expedition Photographer and Videographer.
We are joining you today from the RV Lake Guardian in Lake Ontario's National Marine Sanctuary. We are here on a first of its kind expedition where we are documenting the shipwrecks within the sanctuary with our remotely operated vehicle, Rhodey.
And today, actually right now in just a few minutes, our team is preparing to send our ROV down to one of the deepest wrecks that we will go to during this expedition. And it is also a wreck that has never been seen by humans before. You saw in our intro video that some of these wrecks have been visited by scuba divers. The wreck we're going to today is over 600 feet deep, so humans cannot get to it via scuba diving, but we are going to go with our ROV.
It's really cool. One of the main goals of our expedition, Marley, is to go down and document these shipwrecks and produce these high resolution 3D images that we'll be able to share with the public afterwards. And I think we have a clip from our chief scientist, Ben Ioset, explaining our data products a little bit more.
This model is of the schooner E.B. Allen, which is sank in 1871 in Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary. Some of our colleagues over there generated this beautiful photo model. You can see on the level of detail that this allows us to capture in a single dive. If we were mapping this manually, this would probably be at least dozens of dives, which all has expense and time as well as safety wrapped up into that. This one is actually from Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary. This is the wreck of the St. Peter. It's a three-masted schooner. And this actually gives you a better sense of the entirety of the site than you ever get underwater. I've been fortunate to dive on this a few times where we had visibility well enough to see the whole length of the ship, but that's pretty rare. Usually you only get to see about 30 feet in either direction.
What's the depth of this?
This is about 125 feet deep.
So as Ben was explaining there, the generation of these 3D models is a really big part of what our ROV is doing. It's capturing some really beautiful cinematic footage, but it's also doing photogrammetry and collecting all kinds of really, really valuable data for the preservation of these shipwrecks. one of the really cool things about Rhodey, our brand new ROV, it was manufactured by a company called JM Robotics. We just got it. It's been working great. And one of the most exciting things about this ROV, you can see how small and nimble it is, which makes it perfect for exploring these delicate old shipwrecks. It can be hand carried. It only weighs about 100 pounds. And the camera system on our ROV is incredibly sophisticated and powerful. These Voyus cameras are the same camera system that was used to explore and document the wreck of the Endurance down in Antarctica. So we are using the best of the best equipment out here.
We worked really closely with JM Robotics to pick and identify the best sensors for this job. And when you get a new piece of equipment with all of the new sensors, it's really important to test all of that beforehand. We actually just received Rhodey about 2 weeks before we came out here. So it was of vital importance for us to get that in the water and test the ROV, not only just all of the software and sensors, but our teamwork as well, identifying what roles and responsibilities everybody would fill, our line of communication. You can see us here in Vermont at the Dorset Marble Quarry with Rhodey on the left and Rhodey's little brother on the right. And this was a really great experience for all of our students to feel comfortable within the group, learn how to co-pilot the vehicle, learn how to work with the rest of us really in this small dynamic team actually.
Yeah, I mean, when having brand new technology is really exciting, but you've got to make sure everything works. And you've also got to make sure that your protocols and communication with your whole team are really solid before you come out and start doing this. And fortunately, our team has come together really fluidly, really quickly. We've gotten right to work and been able to get a lot of really good work done in a short amount of time.
It looks like we have some exceptional teamwork happening out on the back deck right now. We're prepping Rhodey to go down and explore this never before seen shipwreck. It's super exciting, Marley.
Yeah, it looks like they're just about ready to go. I can't even remember what launch number we're on now. We've just been coming in and out of the water the whole time we've been out here, but it's yeah, the teamwork has been great, and the fluidity with which they get this thing in the water now is pretty well rehearsed dance at this point.
One thing that's been exceptional to watch throughout this expedition is how well everybody has been communicating, and that has allowed us to be super successful on every dive. We have a team on the back deck, we have our ROV piloting station, and we're also in constant communication with the bridge. This vessel does not have dynamic positioning, so it's really, really important for us to be aware of where we are, any corrections the vessel might need to make to stay on station. And it's been a fantastic group effort from everyone on board to keep everything moving really smoothly through effective communication.
Yeah, every other research vessel I've worked on that's done ROV operations has had dynamic positioning. So, you know, obviously our ROV is much smaller than some of the larger deep ocean ROV systems, but it's still, you know, a big challenge for both the pilots and the folks on the bridge driving our ship to, you know, work in tandem.
This is definitely a unique situation.
Yeah, and it's been really impressive to see how well they've done that.
I just saw them check the latch mechanism, Marley, so I think we're about to raise the ROV up in the A-frame. This is so exciting. I cannot wait to see this wreck. It's been, as we've been approaching all of the wrecks on our other dives, it's the feeling that you get is really just kind of ethereal and spooky when everything comes into focus.
Yeah, to see these, you know, the first images when the camera first sees a wreck that, you know, hasn't ever been seen by human eyes before. It's crazy. For me, as the expedition photographer, I love obviously seeing the imagery of the shipwrecks on the screens, but also seeing the reactions of all of our shipmates, and, you know, to see everyone's eyes go wide, you know, to see the smiles, everyone's pointing, everyone's, you know, yelling and excited. It's really just a special thing to be able to document not only the shipwrecks, but the joy and wonder and awe that they inspire.
We have quite a few viewing stations here in the main lab where our pilots are for everybody to congregate. And anybody that's not actively on shift is glued to the TV that's showing all of the dive footage. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm glad we set up multiple monitors so that the pilot station wasn't too crowded. Everybody wants to be in on the action, but we do have multiple monitors showing our dive footage, and it's really cool that we can do this live stream today and share this not just with everybody here on the ship, but with everybody tuning in online. This is a really, really important part of our mission is, sharing this imagery, sharing these data. This is what it's all about is because again, people can't access these wrecks with, scuba equipment or in person. So being able to share this imagery with folks in this way is just really special.
And not only will this YouTube video exist on YouTube for people to revisit and revel over the footage, these 3D models are great learning tools for students and also for the maritime archaeologists to go back and study as baseline information for what's actually in the sanctuary. And if we were to revisit these sites in the future and create other 3D models, we could see if there has been any degradation or if the mussel population has changed on the outside of the vessel. It's just a really great way for us to bring this thing that lives on the lake bed to everybody here on land.
And it is really important to be doing this research now. I was talking with our chief scientist, Ben Ioset, who will have here mic'd up shortly to tell us more, but he was talking about how these shipwrecks are very well preserved, but that won't last forever. So it is really important that we get this documentation, we get, these details, just gather as much data as we possibly can while we still have this level of preservation, because they are degrading, they are deteriorating. Hopefully we can protect and preserve them to, not deteriorate any faster than they naturally would. But that is something to be aware of. They won't always be here. This history is rich and we won't always have this access to it.
Marley, how many shipwrecks are in the sanctuary?
So here, just within the boundaries of the sanctuary, we have 63 known shipwrecks, but that does not necessarily mean there are only 63 within the boundaries of the sanctuary, and there's many, many more in the entirety of Lake Ontario. Ben said that a conservative estimate for the number of shipwrecks in Lake Ontario is well over 100.
That's fascinating. And here we are. Rhodey is up in the air.
All right, we're getting
about
ready to
be
go.
deployed, and we are all going to see together for the first time one of the many shipwrecks that are here in the sanctuary. This dance that's happening right now on the back deck, this is something where everybody absolutely has to be on their game. The communication, there's one person in charge back there really running the show and dictating. Oh,
here we go. This is the view from Rhodey going into the water. I love this shot.
I know, it's so fun.
Off on another adventure.
One thing that's been phenomenal is the visibility that we have in the lake.
Yeah.
Something that helps us see further than the cameras or our eyes can see is our forward-looking sonar. That provides a really cool aspect for our pilots, a very vital perspective for them, because the sonar can see further through the water than the cameras can. I'm so excited to see this, Marley.
I know. It is going to take a couple of minutes for us to get down to the lake bed. As I said, this wreck is, I believe, 640 feet, right around 200 meters deep. So takes a little while. We have to, unspool the tether. Tether management is a really important part of this operation. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll take a couple of minutes for us to get all the way down, but it is really exciting when the bottom comes into focus and we start doing stuff.
Something that's cool about Rhodey is that it's piloted with an Xbox controller. So it's almost as if you are in a video game world in the water exploring until you reach your desired target. You can see our pilot, Steven, and our co-pilot, Joe, here surveying a wreck earlier in the week with his handy dandy Xbox controller.
This has been a great thing to highlight for many of the young students we've spoken with over the past week. Holly and I have been hosting multiple ship-to-shore calls with classrooms. A lot of local students have been tuning in, and they get really excited when they see the Xbox controller.
Yeah.
I guess all these kids love to play their video games, and they can use that as a tool in the real world to do some really amazing modern day discovery and exploration. So hopefully that inspires some of the young folks to, grow up to become ocean explorers or explorers of the Great Lakes.
I think it's a great way to make them feel like this is something that they could pursue in the future as a career, because they already have the skill set necessary, which is so amazing that technology has advanced so much that something that is extremely technical, piloting an ROV, is easily accessible to our younger generation because they've already developed these skills.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, this kind of expedition, traveling down to see these shipwrecks with our ROV, it feels like traveling back in time. And it's prompted a lot of really amazing conversations within our team about different time periods, what things look like now, what things looked like 200 years ago, and what things will look like 200 years from now. We've had just a lot of great conversations about different periods of time. Holly, do you want to briefly tell them what you asked the students who came on for our ship tour yesterday? This is a great question.
We had a ship tour, and our students were engaging with their maritime archaeologists, and they were explaining that it's a kind of detective work, and they are essentially looking through people's mundane lives, like going through someone's trash. And I asked the students, how would they feel if in 200 years someone went through their phone to find out who they were as a person? We got some deer in the headlights looks because we had high school students.
I don't think they've ever thought about that before. Yeah.
Hopefully it gave them something to think about for the rest of the day. Looks like we're getting closer to the bottom because we're losing some light. So I think it's a good time to introduce our expedition leader, Jason Fahy, and our chief scientist, Ben Ioset, who will be joining you as our first pair of rotating characters that we'll have during this stream. We're going to have quite a few visiting scientists to narrate this dive for you all, as well as talk about the technology that's helping bring this to your computer screen at home.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and switch out so we can bring in expedition leader Jason and chief scientist Ben, and they will have a lot of great information to share with you all. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Ioset. I'm a maritime archaeologist with Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary and NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. And this is our expedition leader, Jason Fahy.
Hi, everybody. Jason Fahy here. I'm from the University of Rhode Island. I work at the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute as the associate director, and I'm lucky enough to lead ocean exploration expeditions, particularly with ROVs and autonomous systems, as part of my day-to-day job. So I think you had Holly and Marley here for the launch of the vehicle, and we're currently descending to the wreck site. That looks like the ship is in a fantastic position for this dive. One unique thing for doing ROV operations is the ship holding precise position is extremely important, and so the captain and the folks on the bridge of the Lake Guardian have been exceptional throughout the expedition at doing that, because the Lake Guardian doesn't have dynamic positioning. This capability on other vessels that allows basically to put in the latitude and longitude, and the ship automatically holds position at that location. On that, the Lake Guardian doesn't have dynamic positioning, and so the bridge crew is very actively using the bow thruster and the propellers to keep the ship on station. And so all that activity is happening throughout this entire dive while the ROV is on the bottom. We should only have a few more minutes until the ROV reaches the wreck site. for folks to visualize how we've got this set up, the ROV is connected to the ship via an umbilical that has a fiber optic and a copper connection that allows power and communications. But because of the nature of exploring a shipwreck and our worry about getting the umbilical fouled on the wreck, we've placed a clump weight on the umbilical about 35 meters from the vehicle. And so we've got a tag, a beacon on the clump that allows us to, you see some of the deck activities here. That beacon allows us to know where the clump sits, basically straight up and down from the vessel, and then gives the ROV about 35 meters of working tether to approach the wreck safely. And this has proven to be, over the first about a week of the expedition, a really critical kind of configuration for the ROV. I know, Ben, we'll get to, as soon as we get on the wreck, this is all your show. But we're really excited. So the
Bottom on the sonar.
Yeah, so the view that you see on the right-hand side of the screen is a Tritech Gemini forward-looking sonar. It looks like currently this is in low frequency mode, which allows them to see as far as possible through the water using acoustics to identify the wreck. You can imagine that the ROV lights and the camera only allow you to see a very, very small portion of the seabed in front of you, and to search for something as big as a wreck can be extremely difficult with just the camera. So a forward-looking sonar is a critical piece of search technology that allows us to be efficient while we're on the bottom. And I think we'll hopefully see a silhouette of the wreck. Oh, there we go. There's some structure in the forward-looking sonar there. So the pilots are kind of assessing potentially where they might be on the ship, oriented to the shipwreck, to maintain like the umbilical and the vehicle itself as a safe approach. This is the first time that we'll have been close to the wreck, so we don't know the sort of hazards and risks that might be there. So we might have a very cautious approach here for the first few minutes of the dive. Ben, I don't know if you have any thoughts on what you're seeing here in the sonar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that appears to be probably a series of masts lying off port side of a vessel and a bowsprit. What we know about this is a fairly large vessel. This was first picked up on multi-beam sonar in 2022 by the NOAA survey ship Thomas Jefferson while they were doing hydrographic mapping of the lake for nautical charts. And this wreck is quite a large one. Kind of the area of the wreck, not the dimensions of the vessel, measure about 175 feet length overall.
And Ben, you know that by
wide.
The size of the sonar target?
Yeah, the size of the returns on the sonar target. So this is a very large wreck, one of the larger wrecks. We were originally thinking, due to those dimensions and the returns on the multi-beam sonar, that it might be a larger steamship, like a bulk carrier or a steam barge. But based off of that sonar image we saw a moment ago, we're pretty sure that's not the case. So we will find out momentarily.
So we've just turned the lights on the voice camera, and you can see that the pilot has got the umbilical in the camera view there. This is occasionally you'll see that the pilot will spin around and check the lay of the umbilical, if it's near a wreck or any hazards, or how it's tending based on what's going on with the ship. We have perfect weather today, other than it's cold and rainy. From a sea state condition, it's ideal for holding ship position. And so I feel for the guys, the team working out on the back deck, but for our ability to accomplish the mission, these are ideal conditions out on the lake. And we've had extremely good visibility at the other sites throughout the expedition. So we anticipate having good visibility on bottom here.
Yeah, we're well below depths where there's light penetration within Lake Ontario. So a lot of what makes the water green or murkier throughout, and it'll get progressively murkier throughout the summer in the shallows, is algae and kind of phytoplankton in the water column that
What's
produces.
the temperature of the water?
At this site right now, I think the pilot camera was reading around 39 degrees.
Okay. And
So,
what conditions in the lake make preserving these wrecks so special? What's the secret sauce?
Well, first thing is one of the most aggressive natural things that degrade shipwrecks are various organisms, fungus, as well as bacteria, and most probably dramatically is shipworms.
Oh yeah, there's the wreck in the view. We've got a screen here with us that's got a few seconds heads up, so we'll cue you when something's coming up.
The shipworms are probably the most dramatic thing that degrades wrecks in salt water, particularly like down in the tropics. They eat wood from the docks. They'll eat the hull of the ship fairly quickly. In the Great Lakes, we don't have these due to the lack of salinity. They can't survive, so that gives us very much of a edge on shipwreck preservation. Also, the cold water and relatively kind of gradual depletion of oxygen down at the bottom results in an environment which is not conducive to bacterial growth, so it slows the rate of wood rot. And we have the wreck coming into sight here on the voice cam. Is it this one?
Yeah. So so the screen on the right we talked about, which is the forward-looking sonar. The image on the left is from a camera made by a company called Voyis. They're a Canadian company. It's a stereo camera, means it has two 4K cameras perfectly aligned next to each other, about the same distance as the human eye, and then the processing power to not only collect these images, but build a real-time 3D model so that we can assess the coverage of the image to make sure we caught a picture of every facet of the wreck. Wow, look at this one.
So yeah, this is definitely a sailing vessel. All the standing rigging on the bowsprit. The bowsprit is a basically spar or mast that extends nearly horizontally from the front of the vessel.
Is this the anchor?
Was used to extend. This is the one we're on live.
Yeah.
Used to extend your sail area, be able to put up triangular head sails or jibs, which really improve your ability to work to windward. So we're at the bow of the ship, working aft.
This is great. So we just switched. There's two cameras on the vehicle. I mentioned the Voyis Discovery stereo camera, which we'll go back to. But this is the piloting camera. This is if you just bought the HD3 from JM Robotics, this is the main camera that the pilots will fly from. And they offer two different perspectives. This is very low light capable, so the lights don't have to be as high intensity. This is also a wider field of view. And so the pilots are using both of these cameras for kind of a situational awareness, but they're both turning out to be exceptional. And maybe we can go back to the Voyis feed and give a comparison.
Yeah, here we're coming past the foremast. The boom here at the bottom of the screen that extends to the right would have footed the foresail, the large fore and aft or front and back sail that's parallel to the center line of the ship on the forwardmost mast.
Yeah, that's the anchor, right, Ben?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's a wooden stock anchor, which is we haven't seen yet actually on this expedition. All the ones we have been smaller folding stock. This is appears to be a very large sailing vessel.
Yeah. I'm seeing the comments roll through. Geraldine and Daryl, Crystal, Reese are all really enthusiastically following along, and we appreciate it very much. We'll be here for another hour and a half. So get comfortable. This should be really, really special. You can see the rigging on the bowsprit of the ship, but also the umbilical from the ROV in the lower left. And so the fiber optic connection is allowing the Voyis camera and all the images that take you about 10 frames a second being transmitted to the ship. We're putting that all together and then sending it to you via satellite from the vessel. So the pilots have a plan to very methodically survey every wreck that we encounter. And so the first activities are really safety, making sure that they've identified all the hazards where the vehicle could get hung up and and configuring for a safe approach around the vessel. And then you'll see we'll move much closer to each component because this Voyis camera, when close and things are beautifully illuminated, the colors really come out in the features. And so we'll use those close-in images as the foundation for our 3D model. You can see the technicians kind of moving the settings bar of the Voyis camera, actively adjusting things as we're going, trying to tune the cameras. And kudos to the team at Voyis. This camera is exceptional. It's been used on a number of recent expeditions that have proven to show just phenomenal imagery. And we're finding the exact same results here. So kudos to the team at Voyis.
It's been amazing. So here we have a block or a pulley on the port side.
How long is the bowsprit and what is its function on it?
Unfortunately, I can't tell what the exact length is from our sonar imagery.
What's its
However,
purpose on the?
so this basically provides a extension of the ship to have headsails or jibs. They're triangular sails that are oriented kind of parallel to the center line of the ship out in front of the ship. It helps balance the sail, the ship's rigging to essentially make steering more easy. But also those sails tend to give you the best performance when sailing towards and into the wind.
Okay.
You can't sail on a sailing ship directly into the wind. You can probably get about 45 degrees off on a good day. But those sails are vital to being able to conduct this.
So we switched out the forward-looking sonar because we're so close to the vessel. We have a visual on it, and now what you're seeing is the real-time 3D modeling capability of this camera system and some of the tools that the team's using. And so the screen on the right is the rectangle is the perspective of the camera. And as you see these little dots popping up in the image, those are correlations based on the side-by-side camera images of exactly where that component is in time and space. And so it allows you to build this reconstruction. What this is great for us is it's a tool that makes sure that we cover and get an image of every piece of the wreck so that when we're building the more accurate representative images in the lab, we know that we're not going to come back after a whole expedition and be missing a critical portion of the shipwreck.
Yeah, we use this process. It's called photogrammetry. We use it. It's kind of become the standard of archaeological recording in the last really 15 years. And it allows us to essentially scale the image when we're done and revisit a site virtually. If I have a question a month, a year after this, I don't have to get a boat to go out to this site and bring the whole URI team out just to get a measurement on a few planks. Instead,
we will join you anytime you ask. Don't worry.
Yeah,
This is so much fun.
So this will allow me to digitally revisit and study this site continuously. They also provide we're doing this on shallow water shipwrecks in the sanctuary as well. And we're going to be sharing those with the public as we finish processing them. These also provide a really useful tool for tracking degradation of a site by comparing these images like you see on the right with these thousands of points. You can put those into computer programs and compare the difference between successive photo models of the same site and track things like zebra mussel incrustation or degradation. And it will highlight changes in the site's geometry, which allows you to understand how a site might be decaying or if it's suffered damage from anchors. It's worth saying the image on the right here is mainly a coverage tool. This isn't the final product of the photo model. This is mainly to help the pilot envision where they have been on this site and to make sure that we have full coverage and they've photographed every square inch of the site, which is a very challenging process to just do mentally, like you have to when you're diving. These tools are excellent.
So the ROV, I've got a mic too. So
Okay.
yeah. the ROV is flown by a pilot, but sitting right next to him is the co-pilot, has the responsibilities for managing the additional sensors, and also has a sheet with a sketch of a shipwreck. And it's their responsibility to kind of keep these handwritten notes on the hazards, but also where the ROV has been, in order to inform the pilot to make sure that we have not only the VSLAM from the Voyas camera showing the point cloud, but then also a kind of a physical record of where we've been in case that software needs to be restarted or goes down on us. What's happening now is it looks like the ROV is going to be repositioned to image an additional portion of the ship.
There you go.
Yeah, we're a bit disconnected from the pilots. They're next to us, but they're whispering, trying to not to disturb the live stream, so it's a little hard to hear precisely what's going on. Yeah, but I guess maybe I can talk about the team that we have out here and who's doing the sorts of things that you're seeing. Currently sitting in the co-pilot seat, Ben is a PhD student at the University of Rhode Island at the Graduate School of Oceanography. Ben might be in ocean engineering, but either way, he's a member of the team at the Bay campus. And that quick flash of the strobing of the camera stream is because the Voyas camera it has its lights on, but instead of being continuous as you'd normally think of a video camera light, these are strobing very quickly to take images. And so it makes for this instance, it makes the piloting camera on the ROV almost unusable. So we kind of set that aside while we're just using the Voyas camera and the forward-looking sonar to navigate. The question in the comments: what photogrammetry software are you using? For the point clouds that you're seeing here, VSLAM is a product from IVA, the parent company of Voyas. In the lab, we're going to use reality capture, and we have a really strong workflow. I think others have used Agisoft as a software suite. We're really benefiting lately from the advancements in the video game field. And so when you see in a video game a recreation of downtown Detroit, that's all done through tools like reality capture, and the billions of dollars invested into the video game industry is now spilling into ocean science and allowing us access to those same tools for recreation of shipwrecks. Yeah, we don't. There's a question about the swag on the vessel. We'll get the merch store set up, I guess, on the sanctuary site, maybe down the road as fundraiser. But we do have the Maritime Museum in Oswego is the curators here. Michael's here with us. And so if you haven't visited the museum, it's an awesome way to get to know some of the resources, these maritime heritage resources on the lake bed. And Michael's got a whole store there of merch that is representative of the good work that they do. And so I encourage you to check that out.
So now we're on the starboard side of that bowsprit. I think they're trying to get the hull in there.
Yeah, you can imagine the hazard.
This is a pretty challenging. Well, we don't know about the status of the masts yet. It looked like there were some that were down on the sonar, but there's plenty of entanglement hazards on the bow here with those bowsprit guys who provide support to the bowsprit laterally. I mean, masts and spars, these may look like very solid structures, but actually wooden rigging was very fragile back in the day. And things like demastings, or if you were in a storm, having the booms or gaffs actually snap due to uncontrolled movements of the sails.
And does a ship carry extras of those components, or is this something that limp back into port in an attempt to reconfigure?
Yeah, typically on the lakes, I'm unaware of. I don't think that it was too typical to carry a spare spar on long ocean voyages. Like ships of the Royal Navy in the early 19th century would carry like a collection of spare spars on deck. But those would also displace cargo and get in the way of cargo handling. So they don't seem to have been carried very frequently. The starboard side here is pretty deeply embedded in the lake bottom. It's very muddy.
Why was hauling cargo on the lake so important? What did it?
Yeah. So the Great Lakes form a continuous corridor for maritime transport, extending from the Atlantic Ocean to about 1,100 miles inland in Superior, Wisconsin, and Duluth, Minnesota. And water transportation is and has always been really the lowest cost means of transporting, especially heavy bulk goods. Early on in the 19th century, a lot of transport was focused on sustaining kind of these developing frontier settlements, provisions, and manufactured goods. Throughout the century, as kind of industry developed and the Midwest industrialized and urbanized with the development of cities like Chicago and Milwaukee and Detroit, the Great Lakes went through a massive transformation. I mean, if you think about, for instance, Chicago being founded in the 1830s and then going from that to really like over 500,000 people by the end of the century.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact numbers, but it's staggering growth rate. It was doubling its population.
So all that
Every 5 years.
material was transported through the Great Lakes to enable those sorts
Yeah,
of
the industries that were in these cities, ironworking, lumber to build these cities, and then also the connections. One thing that drove that development and growth of the region was water connections of the Erie Canal, which allowed for kind of expedient and inexpensive transport from tidewater regions, the Hudson River and the East Coast and extension to the foot of Lake Erie. And that was opened 1825, and it really changed the dynamics of shipping on Lake Ontario during that time, because Lake Ontario was essentially bypassed in the main routes for at least American shipping through the opening of the Welland Canal across the Niagara Peninsula, and later the Oswego Canal shortly after. The American side kind of reestablished their role in shipping, albeit at a smaller scale than it had been before that.
Then we got a question from, I think
Yeah.
it was Brad in the chat, about the potential age of the shipwreck, and maybe if you could talk about some of the clues that you're seeing that might help you gauge.
So the thing that stands out to me on this is it looks to be, it's definitely late 19th century. One of the big clues is we can see wire rope rigging. This is standing rigging mostly, which is the rigs that support and hold up the masts of the ship. You can see on the right here, kind of at the top of the screen, there's a bunch of what appears to be kind of muscle encrusted rope coming up and laying over this mast. And that is basically strands of braided iron wire. This was first, it was invented much earlier in the mid 1800s, but was introduced first on the lakes in about 1862, 1863, and it became really popular by the 1870s. It was much more durable, actually it was lower cost, and versus having to replace all of the rigging, and there's miles of rigging in one of these ships.
And we saw a shipwreck that was potentially earlier that you thought had a
hemp or manila
exactly.
rigging was actually preserved, but down on the wreck. So that's a huge indication right off the bat on when this might have been at least rigged. I mean, that would have been replaced throughout its lifetime, but that says that this ship was lost sometime probably after the 1870s. That's pretty consistent with the size of the ship. If the ship is actually, we're going to get better scaling information from this the photo model here, but if this ship is actually approaching 170 feet long, that would really suggest, due to the size of the Welland Canal locks, and that would have limited it to just Lake Ontario, that this was built post 1884. So this is probably end of the 19th century, just based on a spot date. Here on the left, next to this post, that you can see the copper cap on. On this, okay. When we go back, There's a bilge pump there just aft of the windlass and the gear for hoisting the anchors.
I can't get over the quality of the imagery from the Voyas camera.
Yeah, it's pretty
really is exceptional.
At the top center, you can see something that looks like a small little doghouse with an opening on top. That is the companionway hatch leading to the forecastle, or the forecastle. That's where most of the crew would have actually lived, in a compartment in the front of this ship. Just forward of that, towards the camera, there was the windlass, which is what was used to raise and lower the anchors. We'll get a better look at that in a minute.
The pilots are being.
Yeah,
I hope everybody at home appreciates the how careful the pilots are being, but also how aggressive in trying to get close enough to really show the detail and the color in the images for folks who are viewing. Kudos to them, because they're really putting in the work, and I'm sure it's stressful for them to be flying this close to so many hazards.
Yeah.
Okay, it sounds like I'm gonna relieve Ben of his duties on the live stream so he can go sit next to the pilots and help coach them through to make sure that we have a complete record of this. But Ben, thank you so much.
And I'm sure we'll be back on later.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Holly.
Hi, Jason. Ben's wealth of knowledge is
It's-
exceptional. Having him here is, I mean, if he's our chief scientist, we have to have him here, but it's so fascinating to listen to him and to know that all of this information is just logged in his
I
brain.
think he's honestly running on coffee and shipwrecks. That's been his diet for the last 5 days.
I think this is the most exciting
Oh,
2
that's
weeks
great.
of his life thus far. We are fortunate enough to not just have one maritime archaeologist on board, though. We have another maritime archaeologist joining us, Willie Hoffman, who works for NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, and he also has a vast knowledge of shipwrecks and the artifacts that we can potentially find on these shipwrecks. So I think I'm going to grab Willie and have him come join you.
That sounds great. Don't leave me alone. Some questions in the chat. Willie,
Yeah.
welcome.
Yes, thanks for
welcome to
having
the
me.
live stream. There was a question in the chat about, have we seen any fish? Surprisingly, on the shipwrecks, we haven't seen that many. We've done this same sort of project across like the Western Pacific, and you will see that structure is an aggregating function for fish. But in the lakes, so far, we have seen very few fish. In the sonars, we've seen some schools of fish that have obscured the sonar images that we've been mapping in the evenings, but not on the wrecks.
Yeah, they were able to image some really big fish congregations. So it's
There was
pretty
a
amazing
comment
stuff.
that we have potentially a floating shipwreck, and then somebody else said, no, it's probably a school of fish.
Just a school of fish. But no, it is interesting, and it's an interesting thing that the lack of fish actually helps with the photogrammetry, because you don't have sort of moving biological things around the wreck. So
There's a comment regarding the ROV that it flies a lot like a quadcopter, and that's actually a really accurate assessment. One unique feature of the JAM Robotics HD3, which is the kind of the core of the Rhodey ROV, is that it has the ability to fly with 6 degrees of freedom, and it can orient itself much more like a drone than it could a classic remotely operated vehicle. And so you'll see the pilots, because the Voyas camera that we're looking at here is fixed on the vehicle, they'll adjust the orientation of the ROV to point down into holds to see things that normally we couldn't image without the ability to maneuver that vehicle in that way.
and that's particularly one of the ways that we've noticed on the deck up here. There's a couple of companionways and hatches that go down into the holds below. So one of the things we'll be interested in seeing is if we're able to kind of get the ROV in a position like this to sort of get a peek into those
And
to get an idea.
We had great success on previous wreck through the expedition of looking inside and being able to identify the cargo that was being shipped at the time. And those are key tips for the archaeologists to help identify the when and who it was serving, really tie back to maybe the historical records so that we get a firm confirmation about which shipwreck it is.
Yeah, and as Ben was talking about before, kind of what the archaeologists are looking for now is kind of all those little clues that'll give you ideas about how old the ship is,
Yeah.
what it might have been up to. So this is really incredible, and just the preservation of these sites, it's just really been blowing my mind. I have to say.
Willie, Ben has, and he's described himself as, his passion and expertise is in these wooden shipwrecks in that period of the lakes. What's your passion?
I would say one of the archaeologists often have a sort of very, very specific skill set. And of course, Ben and folks like that are experts in really understanding how the ships are made, the same way sort of an architect would understand a building. One of the things that I specialize in and study is actually the material culture. A lot of the objects and artifacts that you would find, particularly ceramics, is something that I'm very interested in.
And we saw a shovel and I guess the one wreck that we were looking at was identified and Ben described it as a package freighter. So it wasn't like bulk cargo, but it was, someone ordered 100 shovels, and we saw 100 shovels in the
it's a sort of cases and crates of things that folks would be, shipping out, and particularly at that time, this is the frontier. So they're looking for types of things they would need for their households, goods like that.
It looks like okay. Hopefully,
and it's really
sorry about that.
No worries. It's something that we are staring closely at the cameras to try to soak up all those clues. And I saw Ben was talking about earlier about the wire rigging as one of the big clues to the age of it. So this definitely looks like a late 19th century site, but it's really just incredible to see the preservation on these sites. It's really just unbelievable. I think there are very few cases of such exceptionally well preserved sites like this going to see in the Great Lakes.
So comments in the chat, folks saying, get down in there with the ROV. We are working on it. This is all part of the plan. Yeah. This shipwreck is one of the largest that we've been working at here on this expedition. And so this is going to take time, and the pilots are exceptionally cautious, and we'll gain more confidence with the layout and the hazards associated with the wreck. And probably one of the last few things we will do is do that kind of pokey in and look into the holds and get up and under things. It's a really unique feature of this ROV to be able to do that. And we save that kind of high risk stuff for last. Yeah. So if there is something that happens, we haven't compromised all the data collection previous to that.
And this side too is I'm so appreciative of Dave, the ROV pilot, and the work that he's doing. This is a really challenging site, particularly with all the rigging and things around there. So this is just incredible.
We're lucky enough. You mentioned Dave. Our plan for the expedition is to do a wreck survey like this in the morning. So we have a team associated with the morning crew, and then an afternoon, evening ROV dive. And we've been able to keep that pace of visiting 2 shipwreck sites a day. And then we map at night, and we wake up the next morning, and the mapping team kind of does turnover with us and says, hey, look at this, look what we found. And on our second day of the expedition, we kind of threw the plan out the window and went to what was a new target. Right. And it turned out to be what we think is possibly a brand new shipwreck to the century.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's actually what's really exciting about this work, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of this, in that this is a brand new national marine sanctuary, and the work that we're doing is really kind of building the foundation. Yeah, we're sort of doing that first step of identifying these sites, of learning where they are, getting this type of documentation. This type of documentation, particularly photogrammetry, is really helpful for us because we can create photo models at different points in time, and then compare them so we can track and monitor the condition of the sites. And we can observe what types of changes are happening, or if there's been any damage, or sites are breaking down. Yeah.
I'm just so impressed. I'm kind of like, I have a thought that I want to talk about, and then the camera catches my eye, and I totally lose focus because the shipwreck is really so special.
And the photogrammetry too is really wonderful to use in the sense that we don't have to sort of see everything now. We can kind of watch and observe and take notes, but then we have the ability to kind of go back and move around the site and kind of look at it. So it really, really helps our analysis moving forward.
We're, one of the things, not only generating these models throughout the summer, it will be a task for the team at URI, but NOAA's commitment to making this data public so that then the public can access that 3D model and explore it just as you would. You know, it's going to be the same data source that you're going to be using for the analysis on the precise identification of the wreck or pulling out these cultural kind of implications. And the people in the comments, the people joining us live will have access to those same models to explore, and maybe they'll find something that
Right.
you have.
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. And particularly when you put things out there, you can find people who have expertise or knowledge of things. So we might get researchers out there or other folks who are giving us clues or information.
We've been
about the
flooded
sites.
by folks in the local community here who have these passionate.
Yeah.
You know, we had Mark join us on the ship the other day for a tour, who's looking for this C-47 that's potentially in the lake, and was overwhelming us with the amount of information that he's pulled together on the potential location and just all the details of that one incident. And we're really lucky to have some community partners that are participating with us here that have done much more work in the lake than we have. And kudos to Tim Keza and Dennis are here with us and provided a lot of the background information that allowed us to get to these sites in the first place. So thank you to them, and they're huge partners of the sanctuary.
Absolutely.
Which is great.
No, and a lot of the work that they've done had really kind of set the stage, particularly if we didn't have a lot of that initial information to really even kind of begin to get an understanding of how special and unique this place is. It really kind of helped us move that process forward.
We could have a whole live stream of Tim telling stories about, like the excitement of the finds, but then also the trials and tribulations of being out on a small boat doing what we're doing on a large vessel. It's Tim and Dennis out there exposed to the elements. As soon as the ice breaks, he described heading out onto the lake to continue this passion that he has. And some of the stories, I was like biting my nails on how it was going to turn out. Is the boat going to flood? Are they going to freeze? Just really committed to doing this work, and kudos to both of them.
No, it really feels, from my perspective, almost luxurious to get to work on a vessel of this size and to really have all of these tools and capacity available to us. So it's just incredible. Yeah, shout out to the Environmental Protection Agency for providing the Lake Guardian, the ship's crew. I mentioned ship handling at the beginning of the live stream and how well they've done, but the marine technicians that are working with us on the back deck supporting the launch recovery of the vehicle and the sonar equipment over the side have been exceptional. We're just really, really thankful for the partnership with the EPA on this project. I see someone asked a question of where we'll be posting the photo models. I anticipate all of this will live up on the sanctuary's website. Yeah. So the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, if you go to their website, you can actually link to all of the national marine sanctuaries that are within the sanctuary system. And we'll probably be able to put those up there. And there's also some really great photo models that are currently up at the Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary webpage. They've been doing a lot of similar work to this. It's amazing the detail, even in the point cloud model, you can see the rigging clearly, like the resolution and the smarts that are in this camera are really impressive. Look at, you can see the anchor coming into the model now, just appearing out of nowhere. Yeah, this is great. What features are you excited? You mentioned that the cultural kind of components, but what would be something that you might see on the deck of this ship or in the hold that would be like, oh, that's precisely a marker in time for this thing? Yeah, I would say primarily the things in the hold inside are things that we would want to get an understanding of, and particularly understand, what types of things are cargo, what's being carried on the ship, what are things that might have been personal possessions or belongings to folks who were working and kind of living on this ship. You imagine, as we are doing now, when you're out to sea, you are a small family in a little community. Sure. So you can really get an understanding of what it was like to kind of live and work on these vessels. But you won't find a newspaper with the date on it. Right. So how do the cultural items help you narrow down to? Sure. We look at really any clue we can get, particularly for objects like ceramics. We have a really good understanding, at least in kind of the more modern history, of how they were manufactured and sold, in many cases as mass-produced products. And like all things, folks were always kind of keeping up with the times and keeping up with the Joneses. So there is a pretty consistent sort of change in kind of aesthetics and styles, and changes in technology about how things were manufactured. So we can look at those objects and kind of get those clues to sort of get a sense of where they were made, what time period they're from.
So like a ceramic fingerprint almost of
basically,
the time and place that it was.
And it'll be interesting too to see, a lot of these areas. We know they were working with kind of commercially produced mass goods. At this time, in this kind of later 19th century, a lot of things would have been manufactured in the U.S., but there were many areas that had very localized production of things, like ceramics in particular. So it would be really compelling to get a sense of what kinds of local manufactured objects we have, to get an idea of kind of where these ships are moving from.
That local aspect is, we mentioned kind of the local shipwreck hunting community here and how they've supported the sanctuary and its foundation, but the backstory of the sanctuary is that the communities around the lake, the 4 counties that border the sanctuary, banded together and proposed to the federal government to create a national marine sanctuary here. And it took like 16 years from that first concept from the community to get all the way through the process and to have the sanctuary designated. But here we are. And I'm really proud that, we're the first kind of federally funded expedition to help protect these resources. But I hope that the public sees this as, fulfillment of their request to the government to protect and help preserve these resources.
And really the community support for this has been really incredible. And it does mean, I think we have an obligation to deliver on that and to share this information. And it's really wonderful. We gave some tours to a local high school a few days ago, and it was really amazing to sort of kind of see the look of awe and wonder on these kids, to sort of be like, this is right there, right out there.
And it was like, you saw it happen, like the realization. And the ones, because I was with you when he asked the question, is this in the water right out here? And you responded, and you saw it process, and then his eyes like light up. And I was that was my favorite moment of yesterday.
I really love that aspect of archaeology, and particularly the idea of doing archaeology in local areas. I think a lot of times when folks think of archaeology, they think of kind of far off and exotic places. And I really love the idea that areas where we already know a lot of the history, there's a good understanding of how this area came to be. But the idea that's kind of right sight unseen, but right under our feet or right under the water, there is a lot of information that can kind of tell
the
us
idea that we're making new discoveries in the United States. Like, I'm excited to be a part of it. I thought this was all done. I thought we knew all of these sorts of things, but it's not the case. And we're kind of showcasing that here.
And particularly for folks like Ben, I think, revealing those parts of history, but particularly for folks who are very interested in the details of like shipbuilding traditions, getting to see kind of the diversity of sites that we're documenting from really different time periods, from the early 18th century into the 20th century, from the 19th century into the 20th century. It gives a lot of clues about how folks were adapting to this area, and particularly sort of changing and modifying things to make sense for here. And particularly with the canals and all of the sort of landscape features and the types of ports and docks that they have, you really get a sort of localized tradition, and we get to kind of see that right here.
Yeah, that's great. A question from Kenneth in the chat, asking about where we are exactly in the lake. It's come up already a couple of times in the comments. The latitude and longitude and the depth of these locations is something that we're going to do our best to protect until the management best practices can be in place. And that's not trying to exclude the public from this, but it just takes one bad actor to remove an object or to disturb the site, and we kind of lose the goodness in this kind of moment in time when we're first here. And so I think the sanctuary is committed to making as many of these sites as possible publicly accessible. Ben's been talking about how he's got a task for the shallower locations to build a plan to allow diving at those locations and to manage that. But at this point, we're able to give kind of the lat longs and the depths of these locations.
Sure, and that is a really important thing for the sanctuaries program is to make these sites as publicly accessible as
Yeah,
possible. And really one of the main ways that we facilitate that is by providing mooring buoys
Yeah.
on sites. That does a couple of things. It prevents folks from accidentally dropping an anchor onto a shipwreck site. And as you can see, there's a lot to get tangled up in on some of these sites. Many of them are pretty fragile because they're wooden.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure the sites are protected when you're going to visit them. And also adding moorings to the site gives you sort of a safe entry and exit point for recreational scuba divers.
And then you'll probably also have some aspect of routine kind of reinspection
Yeah,
to understand the human influence on these sites.
Yeah, and as I was mentioning before, the photogrammetry is really kind of one of the main tools that we use for that. And it's our goal to kind of continuously kind of monitor and observe these sites and understand what's been happening to them.
Yeah, so you're describing another method of building these 3D models. This is a diver-based
Yes. Yeah.
camera system, and you guys, like here, we can go slow, we can stay in the water all day, but you have limited bottom time and have to collect those images to build the model in just 1 or 2 dives.
Yeah, it's actually funny. I feel the sort of like, oh, hurry up,
Urgency.
go faster. There's a certain kind of urgency because you're usually watching the clock tick down on the very limited bottom time that you have when you're trying to do this as a scuba diver. So this is, just really incredible, the sort of opportunities that this opens, particularly too with the Voyas camera and the stereo camera system. It's giving us such a higher resolution, I think, that we would get with just a handheld camera.
We've got 2 similar questions, one from Pulse Point, and then I see Adam asking, what are the advantages of shipwrecks in freshwater versus saltwater? And Adam's kind of twist on that is, how do certain factors contribute to the degradation of the wrecks?
Yeah, it's a pretty complex set of factors that play into that. But obviously, as we're seeing here, cold fresh water helps preserve sites.
Yeah.
You have to imagine these sites are essentially refrigerated.
Oh, look at the mast. This is broken off, right, and laying on the seabed. That's fantastic.
That looks like. Oh, that's a sort of trestle tree, a crow's nest that kind of supporting the kind of upper mast area then where mast would extend above that.
I cannot help but have these Pirates of the Caribbean thoughts as we're going through this, right?
But no, and so we've learned, and as there are in many of the other sanctuaries in the Great Lakes, the Wisconsin Shipwreck Coast and at Thunder Bay, and also here, again, these basically refrigerated sites in fresh water. It also really depends on the kind of environment they're in. We have, for example, archaeological sites in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary.
Yeah.
That those are ships that wrecked in very shallow water on these very shallow kind of coral reefs and atolls, and the ship would basically ground, get a hole in it, fill with water, flounder, and then be abandoned, and essentially just sort of broke into pieces over time. So in many cases, archaeologists are not this lucky to get to see this much. In many cases, we are only really seeing the lowermost parts of the hull.
Yeah, because your ceramics at that point on a like shallower wreck that's tidally or influenced by waves and kind of storms might get destroyed. Right.
Yeah, and in many cases, we're working with very small fragments and shards of things. But folks like Ben and who are experts in ship construction, in many cases, a lot of their task is to do reverse engineering, where you're looking at a keel and some frames, and you try to kind of build out what the whole ship would have looked like.
Wow.
And so this really makes our job easier in many ways.
Are we if we saw into the galley area, would we see like the captain's coffee mug and then the first mate's coffee mug all hanging on a peg kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Super cool. Some things never change, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
This is great. So this is the kind of rhythm that we have gotten into where, the initial excitement ramps up and then we get into this really detailed inspection and the pilots are huddled around with, the local shipwreck community that's on board with us, and Ben leading us through a description. The pilots kind of, Ben has, as chief scientist, one of the luxuries that you have is you get to tell the ROV what to do, right? So if Ben wants a perspective of a certain aspect, even if we've imaged it before, he gets the final say.
It's been really a wonderful team to work with. It's great to see kind of different partners come together and folks who haven't had the chance to work together before kind of all come together around this and kind of share the same excitement. It's sort of everyone has kind of goosebumps, staring at these imagery.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning the team, because it's important to note that this isn't, you, Ben, are experts and leaders in your field, but we also have a group of students on board that are participating actively in all aspects of the expedition, from working on the deck to sitting co-pilot to managing the multi-beam sonar system in the evenings. And they've added extreme value to, like, I think Susanna is the one who spotted the shipwreck in the sonar and came waking everyone up. Got to be the person who saw the thing, right? As an undergraduate in ocean engineering, I'm just excited to have been able to bring them. They've made this even more special for me to have the students on board, and I'm really excited for like the next generation to get it, involved.
And also on that topic, someone else had given a shout out to the crew on the vessel here, which is it's just been incredible. We have been we have been safe, we have been well fed, we have been very lucky in getting folks who are willing to have the patience to kind of work with us and kind of work this out. I don't know if it showed at the beginning of the launching of the ROV.
We did, yeah.
But it's a little bit of a complicated dance to get all that coordinated. So it's really, really turning into a smooth operation now.
Yep. Extremely warm welcome and a fantastic ship here provided by the EPA. All right, so I think we're getting the cue. Willie, maybe we could send you back to
Swap out?
Yeah, with the ROV pilots. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's much appreciated. Hello, Holly.
Hey, Jason. Willie is also so full of knowledge and equally as fascinating.
Yeah, just keep that seat full of experts.
Well, we're running out of scientists on the ship, but we're fortunate to have the capacity here. The same technology that's bringing us to your living room can bring scientists to the ship. So we have somebody that is ready to join us remotely. We're going to have Phil Hartmeyer from NOAA's Office of Ocean Exploration, who's also a maritime archaeologist, join us, and we're going to get his insight on this really just gnarly wreck. This is the least put together wreck that we've seen this far. And I'm actually going to relieve you of your post for a few minutes, Jason, because the pilots they need your assistance.
Oh, okay.
Can you give me your mic before you leave, though? Jason will be back. Hey, Phil, how you doing?
Very, very well. Congratulations on a great dive so far.
Yeah, this site is so cool. I think we didn't know what to expect, but everything we visited so far has been this pretty put together little package. This thing looks like it had a rough descent to the lake bed.
It's a master class in 19th century Great Lakes shipbuilding and certainly in schooner rigging. A lot thanks to the wire rigging that Ben and Willie were touching on. And how this thing went down likely really speaks well to its archaeological site now. And putting the pieces together, especially with the voice cam, kind of retracing the site has been just an exercise in amazement for sure.
Yeah, we've heard kind of Ben's specialty and Willie's specialty in maritime archaeology. It's rather broad. You can have a lot of different focuses. Can you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. I spent a lot of my career here in the Great Lakes. Actually, I'm based and coming to you from Thunder Bay National Marine Sanctuary here. And for the better part of a decade, I really focused on especially 19th century Great Lakes shipping and sort of commercial history. So a lot of background in raw, dry, bulk material good transport, but also perhaps of most interest to me is really the sort of social, cultural connections and transmission that come with shipping, not just on the Great Lakes, but around the world. Maritime heritage, maritime history is some of our oldest connections as a species. And really, it's been such a driver for sharing ideas, for sharing people, and for leading to the populating of just incredible areas, including upstate New York and like Ontario.
Oh, this is an awesome comment. Great to see ahead of the Hudson Canyon Marine Sanctuary Council designation work. We actually have somebody here from the Hudson Canyon team. Kate Klimmer has been assisting us with a lot of the outreach for this expedition, but her usual role is to work on the Hudson Canyon designation. So that's a very cool comment. Thank you for tuning in. You were talking about the history and the maritime heritage, Phil. We were sitting around last night looking at our dive footage from yesterday, and we were just kind of speculating of, can you imagine living during the time where sailing across the Great Lakes was one of the primary modes of transportations, and there are hundreds and hundreds of shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. It's we've heard very harrowing stories of what was likely happening during these wrecks, and it seemed like the communities that were sailing and working on these vessels on the lakes were some really tenacious people.
Absolutely. You certainly had to be. These were the FedEx trucks and the UPS trucks of the day. No kidding. And, without any of the modern devices and safety nets that mariners rely on every single day. No GPS, no ship-to-ship radio, no ship-to-shore radio. And you have to remember, as through the late 19th and into the 20th century, as ships were getting larger and displacing a lot of the tonnage that schooners, even like the ones potentially that we're looking at now, there was so many of them on the lakes, right? So really, without being able to communicate directly, quickly from ship to ship, you had tons of collisions amidst all the other reasons for shipwrecks potentially to occur in the Great Lakes: fire, fog, weather, all kinds of reasons. And without modern technology, it's just it speaks to I think the toughness. I think it speaks to a lot of the region and sort of our cultural history that was really sort of based on water transport. You have to remember, rail networks throughout the Great Lakes really weren't realized at a completion level until sort of the turn of the century. So ships were it, and to a larger extent, they still remain that way.
We've only been up here for a few days and have learned that the weather can be a little finicky up here in this region. So I'm sure that was the case a couple hundred years ago as well. We have a question in the chat from Connor. Is that photogrammetry just done from a stereo camera, or is it combined with some multi-beam data or LiDAR to fill out the point cloud? One exceptional feature of this Voyas camera system that allows us to create a really complete 3D model is this V-SLAM that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen. So as we are surveying this wreck, we know if we have the correct amount of coverage to create that really high resolution 3D model. So we don't actually need to incorporate those other types of data sets. We could always overlay the 3D model on different things if you wanted to contextualize it within the other bathymetry of the lake bed. But really, this Voyas stereo camera system is an exceptionally powerful piece of software.
It is, and I think it's one of the greatest benefits of the incredible work that you're doing offshore right now. Just the experience of realizing how accurate that coverage can be. As someone who's oftentimes living behind a viewfinder on an underwater camera, you just don't know ultimately if you've collected enough imagery, despite many hours of planning and review and site descriptions that you're going through. But the real time feeling is something that's groundbreaking. It's awesome.
Yeah, Phil, I know that Ben and Willie are divers, and they have dove on a number of these wrecks. Are you also a part of the diving community?
Indeed, yes. Diving is an incredible tool in the toolbox for underwater archaeology. And, underwater archaeology came from really a strong tradition with scuba in the 60s and 70s. But as technology is changing, and as I think our eyes are looking in different parts across the horizon, I think there will always be a need, and still is a need, for utilizing diving to explore these incredible parts of our past. But here we are, right? I'm tuning in from 1,000 miles away, and we're able to do this live with the public behind us, watching, making comments, asking questions alongside the expedition, coming to you from the bottom of the lake on a site that nobody's ever seen before, all from an internet connection. It's telepresence-enabled exploration. It's another tool, and one equally as incredible, to provide access for all to these resources.
Absolutely. And you're talking about the importance of divers and the contribution that they can add. We've had people in the comments ask if we can poke around and get deeper into the vessel, but we have light arms that extend pretty far out on our small ROV, which prevents us from really getting inside. I know this wreck is below the regular human depth limits, so that wouldn't be an option here, but that's definitely a good highlight of the importance of divers still going down and checking out these wrecks. Let's see if we have another question in the chat. Can you bring a pilot on to describe how it is to dive around the wrecks? Sneak peek. Actually, our next guest is going to be one of our ROV pilots, so you will get some information on that for sure. Phil, are you seeing anything on this wreck footage as we're watching it that can give you some clues as to the potential age of this unknown wreck, and what can help you kind of build that history from this imagery?
Yeah, I think some Willie and Ben pointed out some features before, including the wire rigging. That's an important component of sailing vessels, as it puts this particular site on the later half of that 19th century chronology. But there's a couple interesting clues here that haven't been mentioned, and perhaps related to its age, but also related to how it sank. You've got both bow and starboard anchors are stowed. It tells you, potentially that crews really weren't interested in deploying those anchors. So it could highlight maybe a storm event where some of that wasn't possible, and riding out storms can generally be the best case for making it through events like that. But we also could point that to the water depth. Maybe they knew exactly where they were, and they knew that water depths weren't feasible to drop those anchors with the amount of anchor line they held. What we're looking at kind of in the bottom left corner, we passed this as we were looking outboard off the ship, looking in. These dead eyes, the chain plates, right? These are all kind of important diagnostic features that oftentimes had shipbuilder preference and sort of analogous detail that were really found on some, but not others, in their orientation and also the manufacturers. So with eyes like Willie's towards material culture studies, a lot of those smaller details are really key into coming up with an ID. And given the scale of Great Lakes maritime shipping during this period, there were a lot of ships, a lot of vessels, and there was some unique vernacular craft that were built during that period. But there was also plenty of widespread use and reuse of hulls. So looking for items that may have been on other ships is sort of an interesting part of Great Lakes shipbuilding, where there was constantly a trade and repurposing because of the cold, fresh water that often these ships are sailing in. They lasted for a long time. So I think the devil's in the details on this one as we continue to explore.
Hearing you talk about all of these different aspects, it sounds like maritime archaeology is definitely a team sport, because you all have these different super focused areas of knowledge. And so you really all have to come together to put the complete story back together. And it's really cool to see that teamwork happening in real time out here on the ship. And I know that you have received quite a few phone calls from Ben out here as well to get your input and advice on some of the other wrecks that we have been investigating.
Oh, certainly, but not as many as I've been sending him, and Joe Hoyt as well. There's been many of us. Frank can tell us just this is to some degree this is what we live for, and to be able to share it and see it together, whether on board Lake Guardian or here from home from the office, it's just incredible. This is a team sport for sure.
Phil, I'm a movie buff, and one of the reasons why I love to go to the movie theater is the feeling that you get experiencing this piece of art with people for the first time. And I think we are having a moment like that right now as we're sharing this footage with the broader community for sure. We have a comment in the chat actually calling out the community that brought together this team of people in the community surrounding Lake Ontario to actually put in the work to get this sanctuary designated. And that's one of my favorite stories associated with the work that we're doing. Is it was really a community call to action for our governments to put this sanctuary in place. And I think it's such a beautiful story.
Absolutely. Sanctuaries are about people. They're about the resource, certainly, but I think especially where there are sites of underwater cultural heritage, historic shipwrecks like these incredible places, we're rallying around and presenting stories of our human past. And that's an important connection that I think communities rally towards and can really relate to. So it's a story about people through and through.
We have another question in the chat of, will artifacts be brought up from a wreck? We are not sampling any of these sites. We are only documenting them from a safe distance. You can see some dust in the camera footage every now and then, and sometimes our tether will drag the ground and cause some sediments to get suspended in the lake bed. But our goal is to not disturb these wreck sites at all and to document them in their state just as we're seeing them, which is really important for the maritime archaeologists to study and be able to piece together this complete picture of the history of these vessels.
It's a great question, and Holly, you mentioned it really, really well. The importance of keeping these items submerged, it really serves several purposes, and one is the in situ preservation element of capturing, photographing, returning, monitoring, and managing these places over time really benefits from that sort of site stasis, where it remains in this kind of packageable form, as we can learn most from really artifacts and especially small material cultures' relations to each other, and also their kind of geographic location on the wreck. It's also quite challenging to conserve artifacts, material culture that have been underwater for so long. They're completely waterlogged in many cases, and they're stable, where once you bring items that have been submerged for so long to the surface, and that water starts to leave and the artifacts start to dry out, there's a really fast moving clock to preserve those incredible parts of our past that make it just as much to keep them below the surface.
Phil, can you speak to the preservation conditions and what makes the Great Lakes an exceptionally, honestly, the perfect place to preserve these wrecks for exceptionally long times, opposed to wrecks that might be in seawater?
Yes. Ben touched on teredo worms and some microbial activity that can jump on some of these sites and start to degrade them away. I think it comes down to really cold, fresh water. That's what the Great Lakes certainly is all about, and why a lot of these wrecks have the levels of preservations that they do. It's unmatched anywhere on this planet, and for good reason. They're locked in time with really low levels, especially in the deeper waters, low levels of current. Time capsules is not a term that I throw around all that often, but you can really understand that there's a lot of detail here that's preserved because of the environment, the chemical properties of the water that we're seeing. And the levels of biological activity are there. We're seeing some mussels, some zebra and quagga mussels that are, have been colonizing parts of the wreck. But to a large extent, these shipwrecks for maritime archaeologists really speak and highlight the sites themselves as they're presenting in almost the conditions that they went down in.
It sounds like it's almost like putting your vegetables that are starting to look a little sad in the freezer, and then they last for much longer.
Indeed.
We have somebody from JM Robotics tuning in, which is super exciting, as they are the company that we partnered with to build this incredible ROV that we're using to fly around this wreck. Rhodey has this awesome capability to fly with 6 degrees of freedom, which is very similar to flying a drone. Larger ROV systems typically move forward, backward, up, and down, but Rhodey can tilt and move at all angles, and that's allowing us to collect this exceptional high resolution imagery. It was a really great process to work with JM Robotics throughout the construction of this vehicle.
And you can see the ROV path shown in the Voyous modeling build out. The green track of where the vehicle has been really is only executed or executable from that 6 degrees of freedom, allowing the pilots just incredible latitude to get up close, to get around, circumnavigate, and get the details that archaeologists, educators, and the public really are looking for, to not just build these photogrammetric models, but also have that personal connection up close and personal with some of these places.
We're talking a lot about the exceptional skill that it takes to create these models and fly the ROV around. And I actually have a pilot standing by to join me, but we want to thank you for your time today, Phil. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us and share your insights.
Thanks for having me.
See you later. All right, everybody. We're now joined by Stephen Jones, an expert ROV pilot who has been taking our evening shift to document these shipwrecks. How you doing, Stephen?
Very good, very good. So glad to be part of this expedition. Slight change from my normal ROV tasks. Normally we deal with the energy sector, so the opportunity to do a shipwreck survey has been really refreshing.
Yeah.
And very interesting. It's ROV operations. Once you're underwater, you know, you conduct the operations always the same, safety in mind, how you're going to manage your umbilical, how the ROV is going to operate. But this one has been unknown.
Yeah.
You know what we're going to see, and to me, this is really more than a shipwreck survey. I see it as a connection between people, technology, and obviously now history.
Yeah. We felt exceptionally fortunate to have you on board with us. Stephen brings many years of knowledge of operating these HD3s, the type of robot that we are utilizing today. We've viewed him kind of as our coach on the proper techniques we should use, making sure we have our emergency plans in place should we get our tether tangled. He's just been a great mentor to all of our co-pilots, especially our students.
Yeah, so learning to pilot an ROV looks easy when you're watching it from a screen, but there's so many moving parts. It's really spatial awareness, mental agility. You're controlling what's happening on deck with the tether. You're controlling what's happening with the vessel, trying to maintain station. So it's all about good communications, and obviously your concentration level when you're piloting. I actually think I'm there. My children used to say when I was ROV, "Are you underwater, Dad?" I'm like, "No," but I feel as though I am. And you get to map the area. So I'm using what you're seeing there on the screen for the map, and so we're mapping the environment in 3D reconstruction. That's how I look at it in my head. So I know where I'm going, where I've been, where my tether is at all times. The last thing you want when you're doing a video survey is having your umbilical in view. Sometimes it's unavoidable. The tether will always take the easiest route to you. But when you've got a great team on board, you know, constant communication, you manage it well. And then it's a process. It flows really well. Everybody knows their roles and responsibilities, and then it becomes fun. You really enjoy what you're doing. Flying ROVs for 20 years now, I've still got a passion for what I do, and obviously being part of this expedition, you know, when I leave here, go back to the UK, I know I've been part of something bigger.
We're talking a lot about our tether or umbilical that connects the ROV back to the vessel. It's something that's very important to manage. Stephen, can you tell us about some of the obstacles or hazards that we can encounter on some of these shipwrecks, which are probably a fun challenge for you as an ROV pilot?
Yes. So looking at possibly age of the shipwrecks, you know, their construction, if you have anything that's steel, is a potential hazard for the umbilical itself to obviously cut, shred, and when you come upon a mast, etc., it's very difficult that you can get wrapped around that. The ship's constantly moving. You've got currents to deal with, and obviously the overboarding and recovery is so important and has to be managed well. With the vessel trying to maintain station, when we're using a range of sensors, so you would have seen the sonar view. So we're using sonar, we're using USBL positioning, transponder and ROV, but you get to a point where the transponder does not ping anymore in a certain depth, and then you're relying on your team members on deck guiding you with the umbilical. So coming through the latch system, so when we overboard it, we have a latch on ROV, which is then released, and you can't just fly off with ROV. You just want to get going. You've got to manage it, and by good communication, the deck crew, they're telling us where to go until we get all our sensors. We've got USBL positioning, then we can really take over, and we're trying to lower the umbilical at a good descent, that, you know, there's no loops in the umbilical, so the ROV always stays below the plump weight, good communications with the deck crew, and then we need enough umbilical to safely operate round the shipwreck. Sometimes we have to lower the umbilical and sometimes we have to raise it. Again, it's all about good communication.
So you mentioned the clump, which is another mechanism we're using to try and help with tether management. We have a weight that sets 35 meters back from the ROV, which allows us to have 35 meters of flying tether or free tether that the ROV pilot controls. And the rest of the tether that has been released from the deck is under tension just enough to kind of keep it in place, and that definitely helps, I think, mitigate some tether hazards.
Oh yeah, definitely. When the vessel today, it's reasonably calm conditions, but we've always got to take into consideration obviously wave height, the vessel positioning. So being able to use the clump weight, we know our umbilicals kept vertical.
Yeah.
We're kept away from any propellers. And then, as you say, we've got enough free tether to be able to pilot round the wreck. And obviously do a great visual survey. We're pulling together some really good point clouds, and we'll be able to post-process some really good 3D models.
It looks like our pilots have finally released Jason from whatever consultation they needed him for. So I'm going to relinquish my seat, bring him back on for a few more minutes, and then Marley and I will be back in just a little bit to close this out. But this is so exciting. I'm going to grab Jason.
Stephen, how are you?
Very good, Jason. Very good.
I was trying to listen in a little bit, so I didn't have to repeat any of the conversation you had with Holly. But have you been on a project like this before?
Not to this scale. I've been on wreck surveys more, not as, you know, this age.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just talking decades, you know, centuries. So I have been involved in wreck surveys in the past, many years ago. So coming back to do something like this and several wrecks has been amazing.
Yeah.
Really fun to be part of. The crew it's just been immense. I'm on annual leave, vacation here, invited as a guest, and I couldn't thought of a better way to spend it.
How about I was excited for you to join us with your vast experience, but then also how much that would be valued by the students. And so you've gotten to work with Ben and Quinn, the kind of under the folks in Joe, the folks in the pipeline at the university. And what has that been like? Because I imagine that you work with professionals in the community, and here we're handing you someone who's hasn't yet been qualified. But
no, to be honest with you, I've always, my career, you've always have trainees. Everybody, I started as an ROV trainee. It's how you come across and teach them. It's better to give them stages, bits and pieces at a time. Talk through the vehicle, explain what the vehicle does, then all the sensors. But it's getting good processes in place, procedures, standard scope of works. But to be honest with the crew, they're all amazing people. They've taken to it really well. It's made it real easy for me. The deployments are just seamless.
Yeah.
The piloting is seamless. And, to be honest with you, it's an outstanding crew. It's actually been amazing.
I'm most impressed how everyone's driven by the excitement and the passion for what we're doing. And so, I'm constantly barraged with what else can I do to help, and I think in a commercial environment, it's like I have my shift, I do my assigned tasks, but maybe that desire to be helpful, all the time. The lab, we start at 6:30 in the morning, and we're kind of going to bed at 9-10 o'clock, and everybody's in the lab, like looking for something to do. The 3D printer is always running with some new bit or bob that's got to be constructed, or something that's representative of the science. And I just think, I'm really proud of that energy that you brought.
I'm the same. I'm used to doing, when I've been away offshore, like a shift pattern, and it's handed over. But from the start here, everybody's been involved. Nobody wants to go to bed until we're complete, and it's really refreshing to see. It's so interesting, and from my perspective, when you're flying, it's a lot of concentration, and you don't realize the people standing behind you. You turn around and you see their faces.
Yeah.
They're so excited about what they're seeing.
Yep.
And it's just ace.
Yeah, and we have the luxury of a big, beautiful, warm ship with good food, but part of the activity that has to be managed by people on the back deck is out in the rain and the cold, right? So we're rotating folks through, but I think Quinn and Joe have been out there all morning they're in the full rain gear, get rained on it. And the deal we've made with everyone is that if you pay the tax and work on the deck, you come in and, like, this afternoon's dive, Joe will be your co-pilot, right? And sit next to you.
You always have to take the weather into consideration. Some people, especially when it rains, it's going down the back of your neck. You're trying to work an ROV, but I've never seen anyone's attitude change.
I agree.
And that's the best thing about it. They're still happy to be on the deck. They know they're going to rotate and they'll be in the warmth.
Yeah.
But once they're out there, they know they've got a job to do, and that's it.
Yeah.
They can come in for coffee, tea. They're getting rotated. They get amazing food.
I think they're proud of their contribution, even though it might seem like it's a manual task. It's got to be done, and they realize the importance of managing that umbilical could mean a mission kill for us. Like, we'd be down hard for days if they didn't do their part. And so
it's all one team. Yes, we're showing the visual, bringing these wrecks back into view, but it's just a small part. As you say, the whole team plays a part.
Yeah.
And there's no small part. It's all very important. And you're going to rotate that. You start on maybe the easiest thing until you get used to the equipment. You'll be on the umbilical, but then you'll be inside, you'll be piloting, and it all comes together. You know,
Yeah.
it's all experience, it's all knowledge. So it's great for the team.
Yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. Did you, when you talked to Holly, did you talk about, I heard like kind of the ROV basics, but the specific characteristics of the HD3, the JM robotics vehicle, and why it might be, you know, so good at this task?
So yeah, the HD3 is an amazing ROV, amazing platform. It's 4 vertical and 4 horizontal thrusters, very capable ROV. It's so fun to pilot. It's 6 degrees of freedom, which is omnidirectional. And for this kind of survey, we need that capability. It's got a 4-knot forward speed. The vertical thrust is 50 kilograms of force. So we're adding on the Voyas Discovery camera. You've got latches, the sensors. It's more than capable. And as you can see, you know, it's performing outstanding. All the equipment, not just the ROV, the sensors, the camera systems, it's all just coming together. It's amazing technology.
Yeah, it looks like the 3D model of the wreck is really coming together. I was impressed when I was here before to watch the anchor, you know, the anchor on the bow that's hanging over a bit of the rail kind of appear out of nowhere in the point cloud, you know, as the VSLAM from IVA, the IVA's the company that makes the software package that we're using to create the 3D model in real time, as it, you know, processed that image and then was able to tell the distances and the precise location of all those components. There's a lot of math going on behind the scenes, and this, and maybe Stephen, you could speak to this, is the type of computer that's required to run this hardware. You know, an off-the-shelf laptop probably isn't going to cut it.
No, you need a very high spec, either a laptop or PC. But also for the VSLAM, you have a fiber optic tether. The VSLAM needs quite, you know, high bandwidth to operate. But the good thing about the VSLAM, it's built in that live 3D reconstruction. So if we were just doing basic photogrammetry without the VSLAM, you have to post-process, which can take some time. And if you miss sections, to go back in with the VSLAM, you know you're covering that area.
Yeah, that ability to do to have an awareness of coverage is so important, because we have a limited expedition. There's no opportunity for us to come back, you know. So to know that we could leave each of our hopefully 10 to 14 wreck sites that we visit with a complete data package is really, really important, especially for the analysis that Ben and Willie are going to do to date these wrecks and to tell their story. You know, if we forgot to look in the hold, it doesn't, you know, allow Willie to know if there was ceramics. That could be the key thing that he was going to base his analysis on. That would be a big loss for the expedition.
Exactly. It's, you know, there's ways to carry out photogrammetry, and it's all about overlap and angles. When you're just using basic photogrammetry, you can miss spots, and you're right, this is making us productive. We know we've got the coverage, and the model, obviously VSLAM generating the point cloud, but running the high resolution images through post-processing photogrammetry will produce amazing models.
Yeah.
And there's always, when you're not using like a live 3D reconstruction, it can take time to stitch the models together. But, you know, if you want the photos to align, and using SLAM allows us to do that. It makes processing easier. It makes the piloting easier. There is a way to pilot for photogrammetry. As you can see, they've been running lines, and we call it like a vertical lawnmower. Or you do sweeping S patterns, or even like a spiral when you're on the top. There is ways to do it. They say the pilots, and Dave flying just now is making a great job.
How is he getting this image, Stephen? Because I think this is one of the unique things about the HD3. He has yeah, describe what's going on maybe.
Yeah, so we've got a gimbal on the ROV flying screen. So he's pitched down. So the whole
when the ROV's sitting on deck, that camera's fixed and it points forward.
It points forward, yeah. So you've got the camera pointing forward. You've got your 4 lights, outriggers. So what Dave will do, he'll come up vertical.
Yep.
He'll fully pitch down. So
Okay.
he's watching the gimbal, and then he'll fly down gently. And when he comes away, he'll tilt up as he's moving along the vessel. And once he comes to a mast, he'll start leveling out,
Yep.
or even then pitching up.
And that's a unique capability of HD3, that ability to look down, to pitch the whole vehicle down so that you're, yeah.
As well as pitching down, you can obviously, if there is a tight structure you need to get in, you can roll 90 degrees.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a bit of skill,
Yeah.
but the guys at
We won't be doing that here.
the
I
guys
promise.
at JM Robotics, teach people how to fly in 6 degrees of freedom mode. You get
Yeah.
used to it. Everyone should practice before they come on to a site like this, but it doesn't take long.
Yeah.
It can be confusing. As I say, that's why I think I'm in it. So
Yeah.
if the ROV's going down,
You're done.
I'm there. I'm there.
All right. In our configuration, we have we've got the lights for the Voyas camera mounted on arms that are, what are they, 18 inches maybe, like a foot and a half.
So you need to have the LEDs at least half a meter to 1 meter from the optical center. And with the setup, we've got the lights. So there's 4 Nova mini LEDs. They are 250,000 lumens. So we're illuminating the scene. And basically we can then pivot or tilt the lights. And if there is, it pushes the backscatter region further away. So we're able to capture the data you're seeing now.
So if you saw the vehicle when it was on deck being launched, and it looked like it had these antennas almost coming off the kind of port and starboard sides, those are these.
That's the outriggers and LEDs.
Yeah, the LED lights. I think we're getting towards the end of the live stream. I'm going to turn it back over to Marley and Holly to wrap it up. We really appreciate everybody joining. I'm seeing some familiar last names in the comments of family members, and that's probably one of the most rewarding things, is to know that mom and dad and loved ones. I'm getting a text from my sister that she's tuned in, so that's super cool to have family being able to share in what we're doing, because we're all passionate about this, and sometimes you hear people talk like, my parents just don't know what I'm doing, and hopefully this has been educational to help the families and friends understand what we're doing. This is great. So little break, and we're going to turn over to Marley and Holly.
Thank you, Jason and Steven. We're getting Marley mic'd up here. She'll be with me momentarily. Wow.
Right.
What a lot of knowledge that was just shared with so many people. It's so fantastic.
Yeah, this has been a pretty incredible morning. I mean, even after over a week of doing this and seeing all the dives we've seen, this dive in particular is unlike anything we've seen. Just the amount of rigging, the depth that it's at, the size of it. I mean, this thing is massive and gnarly and crazy. It's just incredible. I'm glad that we happened to pick this one for this live stream. This is, I would argue, the best thing we've seen thus far. This is amazing.
I fully agree. Everything else that we've seen has been just this nice little package. This has masts laying in every which direction, so many lines. It's very complex and just really fun to watch the pilots so skillfully navigate this minefield of obstacles and capture this phenomenal data.
It's so impressive. I was just taking photos over at the pilot station, and I got a great shot of Dave Casagrande just laser focused, just amazing. So yeah, we're having a good time getting some really incredible content. I cannot wait to see the 3D model that comes out of this. That's going to be amazing too.
I know. It looks like we are getting close to completing this model, which is fascinating because we've only been on site for 2 hours, Marley.
Yeah, that's amazing.
The speed at which we are able to very methodically move through these shipwrecks and collect all the data we need allows us to survey at least two sites a day, which is really wonderful.
I mean, it's a fraction of the time that it would take to do this manually with scuba divers. And scuba divers couldn't even map this dive because it's far too deep.
I know.
I mean, this wreck. So, yeah.
I am seeing a question of, is there a name board on the stern? I don't think there is. That's what we always look for initially, because that would make our maritime archaeologist's job a lot easier if there were just names on the sterns, but we have not seen a single one. It's also challenging with the mussel coverage, even if there are, sometimes the mussels are so densely populated on the sides of the vessel that we wouldn't be able to see the transom if it was there.
Yeah. I wonder if they talked earlier about the copper that we see on some of the ships. Do you know if that was discussed? I thought that was a really
I don't know if that was
interesting-
mentioned or not, Marley, but you should talk about it. It is a really fun feature.
It's just occasionally, you know, everything that we see, pretty much everything that's wood is covered in these zebra mussels, but there's occasionally a perfect rectangle that's completely clear.
Mhm.
And it's because that is copper. There might be like, I don't know, there was a foothold or a railing or something that was made of copper, and they don't attach to copper. And copper is antimicrobial, I believe.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's, I don't know, just a fun factoid. If you see a perfectly clean space on a ship like this, it's probably because it's made out of copper.
I'm seeing another question in the chat of, is Molly Curran working on your team? She's not out here with us on this expedition, but she is a part of the larger Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute community. Goodness, that was a tongue twister. Molly's fantastic. We've been able to work with her in the past.
I've sailed with Molly many times, and yeah, she's amazing. Wish she was here, but we do have a small but mighty team on board. It's been really great to sail with a couple folks that I've sailed with before on other vessels, and to have some new shipmates on board as well.
I just saw, absolutely. I just saw our tether fly across the screen. I think we're leaving the site, Marley.
Oh, yeah, looks like it. Yeah.
None of this would be possible without the Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary, NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, the OECI. Special thanks to URI for allowing us to use ROV Rhodey, as well as the Lake Guardian, the EPA Lake Guardian, and the team here on the ship. We are exceptionally thankful to all of these different organizations and groups of hardworking people that have worked with us for months to make this happen.
Yeah, it's a huge team effort to do an expedition like this. We're so grateful to our partners. We've had a lot of really enthusiastic support from the Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary. This is one of the newest National Marine Sanctuaries, so they are still kind of, you know, coming online in many ways. They just started their own Facebook page. So if you've enjoyed our live stream today, we strongly encourage you to go check out the Lake Ontario National Marine Sanctuary Facebook page. That's where many of the photos I take will be posted. A lot of the videos that I'm capturing will be posted there. And you'll also find the link to our live stream next week.
Yeah, we will be coming to you live once again on May 28th, next Wednesday at 1 p.m. We will do kind of a summary wrap up of the expedition. We'll share some really awesome dive footage, maybe some funny stories of things that have happened in the 2 weeks that we've been out here on the lake. So please tune in then to hang out with us again.
Yeah. I think that's it for today, but man, this went really well. I am really proud of our team and amazed that we got to see this wreck, and really appreciate all of you for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.